Okay. All right, here we go. We're gonna play it, make sure everybody can find theirs. Did anybody lose theirs and need another? Good. That's nice. I'm glad. Good job, guys. All right, let's play.
Of English people in
Skip to the beginning.
1630s. Puritan New England ceases to be weak and vulnerable and now becomes a power in the region. As they look further west, they see another major power. The English identify the Pequot as an obstacle to their expansion.
In the spring of 1637, Massasoit received word that a force led by Massachusetts
They're in the way for expansion.
Bay and Plymouth colonies had destroyed the Pequot, the most powerful Indian confederacy in the area. In the final battle,
There we go. It's got a 3-second delay, I guess. So did everybody get that, the cause of Pequot War? I think we covered that the last time, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys have that answer down. Okay, so now we're going to be going on what did many leaders or many Algonquian chiefs, what did they do after the Pequot War? That's the second part of 13, those who have that one.
English soldiers, to the horror of their Indian allies, had burned an undefended village, killing hundreds.
The Pequot War established in Indian minds the potential savagery of the English. The idea of 700 people, men, women, and children, perishing in the burning of a fort was incomprehensible to Indians. It was a cautionary tale that Massasoit did not forget.
Soon after the destruction of the Pequot, Massasoit traveled to Massachusetts Bay Colony to deliver to its governor, John Winthrop, a gift of 16 beaver skins, and to restate his long-standing friendship with the colonists, all in hopes that they would continue to honor the promise of shared security the English had made in that first long-ago treaty.
Massasoit hopes that this tribute is going to solidify his friendship with Massachusetts because he's worried, and he's not the only one. Winthrop writes in his journal that after the Pequot War, dozens of Indian groups in the area come to Massachusetts, to the court, and try to make friends. Say, you know, we want to be your friends, your partners, your subjects, whatever it takes. They're frightened.
Are they coming?
Massasoit's eventual heir, his second son, was born around the time of the Pequot War and nearly 20 years after the arrival of the Pilgrims. He knew no world but the one in which English and Wampanoag lived together. Even his names would suggest a man comfortable in two cultures. He was first called Metacom, and later Philip. He came of age in the 1650s, in a world his forefathers could not have imagined. He fancied fine English lacework and richly detailed wampum. He was one of the few Wampanoag who kept pigs, and he counted among his close friends both Indians and Englishmen.
He was described by an English traveler as walking through the streets of Boston, decked out in massive amounts of wampum, showing his wealth and his power, comfortable walking in this world that had been created together by the English and the native people of the region.
As he approached manhood, Philip was more and more aware of his father's growing unease. Massasoit's tribal borders had receded in around Narragansett Bay. Disease continued to thin the Wampanoag. His trusted ally, Edward Winslow, had died. The new leadership in Plymouth had little memory of the time they had needed Massasoit's help.
When do the English lose their sense of openness? Well, when they become more independent, when they realize that they no longer need the Indians. And right around that same time, in the 1650s, they make one attempt to convert the Indians to Christianity, which is to say, in effect, well, if you're going to live among us, you need to basically become us, because we can't live with people who are different from ourselves.
In 1651, Puritan minister John Eliot established a praying town in Natick, Massachusetts. In Natick, as in the dozen praying towns that followed, Indians who converted to Christianity were assured physical security and the promise of eternal life, so long as they agreed to live by moral codes drawn up by Puritan clergy.
The praying Indian towns were set up by the English to basically control Indians. You had all these rules that were alien in concept, and Native people had to do everything in the English way, and everything Indian, of course. All the traditions that were sacred to your fathers and your fathers' fathers since time immemorial, you had to reject all that in favor of following the English way. So you had to look down on your own people, essentially, is what it boiled down to.
Wampanoag people here got the idea that somehow if we are to survive at all, we've got to at least say that we're assimilated. We've got to say that we're Christian, whatever that means, or we're going to be wiped out completely.
In order to be accepted as a full member of the church, you needed to relate a conversion experience that was witnessed by the congregation and that was deemed sufficient, that you've been saved, that you believe yourself to be saved. We have this remarkable set of documents that were published at the time called Tears of Repentance that were Indians from Natick relating their conversion experiences. And they were witnessed by a panel of ministers.
I heard that word, that it is a shame for a man to wear long hair, and that there was no such custom in the churches. At first I thought I loved not long hair, but I did, and found it very hard to cut it off. And then I prayed to God to pardon that sin also.
When they said the devil was my God, I was angry because I was proud. I love to pray to many gods. Then going to your house, I more desired to hear of God. Then I was angry with myself and loathed myself and thought, God will not forgive my sins.
I see God is still angry with me for all my sins, and he hath afflicted me by the death of 3 of my children. And I fear God is still angry, because great are my sins, and I fear lest my children be not gone to heaven.
The English missionaries demanded from Indian people much more than an expressed belief in their God. It was part of an English cultural assault which Massasoit must have seen was tearing apart many native communities. And I think that's why he wants to try and curb the missionaries, try and stop this kind of assault taking place.
As Massasoit's days drew down, he made a point of stipulating in land deeds that Christian missionaries stay out of what remained of Wampanoag territory. Having watched the English erode his tribe's land holdings and his father's authority, Philip determined to make a marriage of power. He wed a woman who was a leader in her own right, the daughter of a chief who had opposed Massasoit's alliance with the English from the beginning.
Massasoit must have wondered what kind of world he was handing on to his sons, to his children. I think there's a certain resignation in some of his actions toward the end of his life. An attempt to stem the tide of English assault on Indian land, on Indian culture, on Indian sovereignty, and a lingering hope that maybe things will still work out okay. Maybe there can still be peace, because I think that was his vision of what New England would be. It was a vision of peace.
Massasoit died in the early 1660s, 40 years after his first alliance with the Pilgrims. His passing came just as a new, hard-edged generation of English leaders was rising to power. Men like Josiah Winslow, Edward's son, who was intent on hastening the final reckoning between the Wampanoag and the English. Philip, just 24 years old, took his father's place as the Wampanoag chief.
And suddenly, it's all on him. He was leading in a very difficult and very dangerous time where essentially every part of our society was being stripped away.
The wampum trade was declining, fur trade was declining. The demand for the English to acquire more and more Algonquian land was increasing. More and more native people, for whatever reason, were choosing to move to praying towns. The world that had created Philip was collapsing around him.
Philip hoped to strike a delicate balance, maintaining his alliances among the English, while also maintaining what remained of Wampanoag sovereignty. He continued to abide by the terms of his father's treaty, but like his father, he rejected repeated efforts by Puritan missionaries to convert him. "If I became a praying sachem, I shall be a poor and weak one," he said, and easily trod upon by others. He also declared a moratorium on land sales. English authorities had little interest in humoring the young Wampanoag chief.
There are a variety of ways that English claimed possession of Indian lands. Everything from just seizing them and then attending to the legalities much later, merely occupying lands that they want to declare vacant and thus available for the taking. One that is, I think, often overlooked is that the English would get Indians indebted. As Indians continued to experience ill health and epidemic disease, one of the things they become indebted for is health care that's being provided by English guardians. Well, these English guardians use this as a way to get their hands on Indian land, so that once the debts have been accumulated, they go to the Indian estate for the land for payment. And this becomes a massive mechanism of Indian dispossession.
What people felt for millennia, this is my land, and my land is me, and I am it, obviously, because we come from it, and we eat from it, and, things die, they go into the land, and we eat from what grows from there. So when we say land, ahki, it's just ahki, land. But if you say my land, you have to say natahkim. This means that I am physically the land, and the land is physically me. And after Europeans were here for about 70 years, people started to write natahki, which is so sad, because that means I am not necessarily part of the land anymore. My land can be separated from my person.
There is a continual erosion of tribal people's ability to maintain control over their own lives. And I think by the 1660s, Philip finds himself up against the wall. In other words, unless one makes a stand, the Wampanoag or the tribal people are going to be completely overrun.
In 1671, rumors spread that Philip was growing angry and preparing to act. Authorities in Plymouth, Josiah Winslow chief among them, summoned Philip to account for himself.
Josiah Winslow has no curiosity whatsoever about these people with whom he's grown up. He's known them all his life. He considers them an obstacle. He considers them untrustworthy. He wants nothing more than to find a means of provoking a war that could lead to their extermination.
You have you not? In recent times, procured a great and unusual supply of both ammunition and provisions, planning an attack on us both here in Taunton and in other places.
These charges against me are false. If you have no such designs, have your men hand over their weapons.
he had two choices. Either give all the weapons up or acknowledge to the English that he was preparing for war, as they were accusing him of. So he had to choose the lesser of the two evils.
Marna Tolteman, Pipinok. Margesh, Piskankas.
Mata the party no come on. One needs to net ucha kusawa. Ma one needs to knock Nina one. Kusip mat Nina wa kus
Margesh, Piskankas.
Before taking his leave, Philip was made to sign a confession in which he admitted disloyalty to the English and promised to turn over any weapons the Wampanoag had amassed.
This is a real turning point for Philip in that it's quite clear that the aims now of the English are not just to gain more and more land, not just to undercut Native people economically and spiritually, but clearly to make Native people their subjects.
They no longer are being treated as equals. They're no longer being treated as allies. They're being treated essentially as second-class citizens in their own country.
Philip was not eager to make a fight with the English. A war would shred his father's historic alliance and put his entire tribe in peril. There were only 1,000 Wampanoag remaining, and nearly half were living in the praying towns. Philip had few warriors, but the Wampanoag chief did prepare, seeking allies among nearby tribes and quietly buying up firearms. At home in Mount Hope, with his English friends nearby, Philip wrestled with the enormity of a war against Josiah Winslow and Plymouth Colony.
He was clearly a person caught in historical forces that gave him very difficult choices. And like many Indian leaders in those situations across the continent, he must have been weighing the options of peace and war. He must have been trying to balance conflicting pressures.
Betrayal forced Philip's hand. In January 1675, Philip's personal secretary traveled to Plymouth to warn Governor Winslow that Philip was arming for war. 3 weeks later, the secretary was dead. English authorities arrested 3 of Philip's men, tried them for the murder, and executed them.
For Indian people, of course, a killing of an Indian by an Indian in Indian country was something that should have been settled by Indian people. After that blatant assault on Indian sovereignty, Philip must have been under incredible pressure from his warriors to step up and do something about this.
As whispers of a coming war spread among the English colonists that following summer, the deputy governor of Rhode Island invited Philip to a meeting to offer some friendly advice.
Gunipiam, Philip. We thank you for coming over to speak with us. Our business is to try to prevent you from doing wrong.
Mata na pani yasaman. Machaman no come man. Onisane ucha kwasawak. Ma onisanak ut nina one.
We have done no wrong.
We sinag ut nina one.
If you start a war against the English, much blood will be spilt. A war will bring in all Englishmen, for we're all under own king. I urge you to lay down your arms, Philip, because the English are too strong for you.
Then the English should treat us as we treated the English when we were too strong for the English.
Philip's angry young warriors refused to heed Easton's warning that war with Plymouth would bring every colony in New England down on their heads. Days after the conference with Easton, Philip sent warning from Mount Hope to an old English friend in nearby Swansea. It might be best to leave the area. When Wampanoag warriors began their rampage, Philip stood with them, convincing other aggrieved tribes in the area, including the Wampanoag's old rival, the Narragansett, to join their fight against New England, a fight the English would come to call King Philip's War. This war that breaks out in New England is a major war. It has a big impact on the societies in New England, both Native American and white. By the winter of 1676 or so, to get outside of Boston for Europeans was a very dangerous prospect.
Native American forces had devastating victories over the English in the early months of that war, destroyed large numbers of towns and people and property, and were very much winning that war and putting the English on a defensive.
The war spread to Connecticut. The war spread into Rhode Island. The war spread into eastern New York. Tribe after tribe after tribe became involved in this.
English colonists from the outlying villages fled to bigger towns. Some simply boarded ships and headed back to Europe. Alarmists among the English feared they would all be driven into the sea.
The English look now very differently at Indian people. Even those Indian people who have lived among them, even those Indian people who have committed to living a Christian life and are living in the praying towns. These Indians now come to be regarded as, at the very least, a potential fifth column, as people who cannot be trusted, as people who are liable to turn on you at any time.
As winter approached, the colonists banished hundreds of Christian Indians living in the praying towns, men, women, and children.
They took them on a forced march to the Charles River, put them in canoes, and put them on Deer Island in the middle of Boston Harbor, which at that time of year is a cold, blustery place. Over 300 or 400 perished from lack of food and exposure because they gave them no blankets or food or anything and just dumped them there.
The war ground on, month after month, exacting a terrible price. 25 English towns were destroyed. More than 2,000 English colonists died. But the shared danger did unite the colonies, and they lashed back. In early 1676, Philip could feel the tide turning, and then the powerful Mohawks, longtime allies of the English, made a surprise attack, killing almost 500 of Philip's men and dooming his confederacy. A year into the war, scores of Indian villages had been burned to ash. 5,000 native people had died. Hundreds of men, women, and children who did survive, heathen malefactors, Josiah Winslow called them, were loaded onto boats, shipped to the West Indies and Europe, and sold into slavery. Native tribes in southern New England had been crushed and would never again control their destiny in their homeland. In the summer of 1676, Philip retreated home to Mount Hope with his wife and children. His cause all but lost.
It does seem a little unusual that he would come back to Mount Hope because there are so many troops around there looking for him. It's like consciously walking into a trap.
When he returns to Mount Hope, he certainly has given up. He's going there to die. Rather than a grand, heroic military figure, he's a more poignant, sad figure, a person filled with sorrow at the end of his life.
On August 12, 1676, an English militia unit, along with a praying Indian named John Alderman, surprised Philip and his dwindling band of followers.
After Philip was shot by Alderman, they dismembered his body. The scarred right hand of Philip was given to Alderman as a trophy of the war. His parts were strewn about the colonies, spread to the four corners.
This is a warning to other people, to other Indian people. This is what the English will This is how the English will deal with rebellion, deal with treason. And remember that in English eyes, Philip was a traitor, and this was the punishment meted out by 17th century Englishmen to traitors.
Massasoit's son was dead and scattered, but the colonists were taking no chances. They captured Philip's son and heir, a 9-year-old boy, and locked him in a jail in Plymouth. While English authorities deliberated on whether to sell the boy into slavery or simply murder him, the Puritans gave thanks to their God.
And the final day of Thanksgiving of the war is the day that Philip's head is marched into Plymouth. This decapitated head on a pole, it's erected in the center of town, and is cause for a great celebration.
They wouldn't take it down, Philip's head. For 2 decades, while Philip's son lived in slavery in the West Indies, the head was displayed in Plymouth, a reminder to the Indians about who was in charge, a reminder to the English that God continued to smile on their endeavor.
It's hard to see how conflict could have been avoided and how the outcome of that war could have been different. Looking at the generation before this war, there is at least a moment where things were different.
For those who have that bottom question, the one after, talking about factors, what factors help end the way of life, especially in the Northeast. King Philip's War joined all the Northeastern Indians together. There's that Mohawk, of course, depending on what they're smaller, the Mohawk helped defeat King Philip and everyone. So we're going to go through the last one. What goes into play? What helps what things walking on people and program people, what things did you see happen that caused that to happen? It's unfortunate that
exclusive corporate funding for American Experience provided by Liberty Mutual. Major funding provided by the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation. Funding for We Shall Remain provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Ford Foundation, the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations, Calliopeia Foundation, and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and viewers like you. Thank you.
The whole of the Thanksgiving story is it started out that way, but ended up in betrayal. Pilgrim people, they betrayed Wampanoag people that had been their ally and helped them when they could have defeated them right at the get-go when they were first here. I'm gonna finish filling out that paper and then turn it into the basket. For those who have been absent a day, stick it somewhere where you can take it home to finish watching the parts that you missed when you were absent on the Zoom classes, and then you'll turn it in next week. Also, while I'm talking about next week, remember that's the mid-quarter deadline. Mid-quarter deadline, yeah, I think I said it the right way. Where nothing before that will be accepted. So get every missing assignment in by next week. So what we're going to be doing today for the rest of the class is that second objective I mentioned, talking about the attitudes between Europeans and the Indians. This is, of course, focusing on Indians that are on the eastern side and the colonists who were on the eastern side of the country. So in this century, the 1600s, we're going to look at what they said and how they viewed each other. So what this type of assignment is when we're trying to ask a question about something in the past, the best way to answer that question is to kind of, I mean, it'd be great if we could time travel and go talk to them, right? I would love it. Okay, I would understand history so much more. I can go back and talk like, why did you do this? Why didn't you do this? And smack some people upside the head. Because some people in history definitely deserve it. You know, Edward Winslow, Josiah Winslow's son, yeah, he definitely deserved a smack in the head, to say the least. So these are these guys' own words. Own words from people is the best way to ask them the question. So if we were trying to figure out, this is the question you want to ask and try to answer to, is what were the attitudes that Indians and Europeans had towards each other in the 1600s? Okay, what were their attitudes? What do they think about each other? Do they think that the other group was proud? Do they think the other group was below them? Do they think the other group was aggressive and violent? Do they think the other group was selfish? What did they think about them? That's the attitudes that we're looking for, okay? So each of these documents are actual primary source documents. And what primary source means is it's their own accounts. They have first-hand knowledge because they were there. If you guys were to ask me about their attitudes, sure, I could tell you because I've learned about it. I could tell you, but I'd be a secondary source, and I'm not the best source. Okay, the best source, primary sources, asking the people who are there, reading what they have said. So that's what we're doing. We're reading what they said. So what we're going to do is each document that we read, and we're going to start today. We're only going to be able to do one today. You're going to highlight one thing, or at least one thing for each document that you can use as evidence to help you answer that question. So if you were to say the Europeans of the Indians were lower than them or below them and not as good as them, okay, why? You're going to highlight in the document what they said to make you think, oh, well, they obviously think less of them because they said this, and that's what you're going to highlight. Okay, everybody with me on what they're highlighting? The evidence. What basically tells you what their attitudes were of the other group. So I'm going to start with the toughest one, document B. This is John Rolfe talking about his decision to marry Pocahontas. Okay, so I'm going to read and then I'll rephrase it because you guys won't know like half the words because we don't speak in this type of English anymore. So follow along with me, document B. Let therefore this my well-advised protestation condemn me herein if my chiefest intent and purpose be not to strive with all my power of body and mind in the undertaking of so mighty a matter, no way led, so far forth as man's weakness may permit, with the unbridled desire of carnal affection. You guys know what the heck he just said? Right? It's weird. So basically what that part says is he's like, I'm telling you guys, I'm going to speak as if I'm John Rolfe. Speak a lower octave, right? Lower voice. He's basically saying, you can condemn me, you can blame me all you want, but my purpose, my reason to marry Pocahontas is not because I want to go make babies with her. Like, I don't have some carnal affection, desire for her body. I'm not doing it because I love her. Okay, that's not his reason. That's what he just said, basically. Continuing, but for the good of this plantation, for the honor of our country, for the glory of God, for my own salvation, because if you're a Christian and you help convert someone to a religion, you basically can go to heaven. That's what salvation means. And for the converting to the true knowledge of God and Jesus Christ, an unbelieving creature, namely Pocahontas. He called her a creature, guys. It tells you a little bit about how he thinks of her. Right there. So already you have a couple things you could highlight. I'm going to read that middle section next. Shall I be of so untoward a disposition as to refuse to lead the blind into the right way? Shall I be so unnatural as not to give bread to the hungry, or uncharitable as not to cover the naked? Shall I despise to actuate these pious duties of a Christian? So he's saying basically what a Christian is supposed to do is help people who are less fortunate than us. So those who are less fortunate, they're poor, I need to feed them, they're starving, they're naked, I need to clothe them, and they're not taking like, actually in this case they kind of are talking literally because Indians at that time and that area wore less clothing than very devout Christians did. You can see that in the movie, they wore less clothing, especially in the warmer months. So but also talking figuratively, like, I'm going to help nourish you. I want to help you out because I'm more fortunate and you're less fortunate than I am. And the reasons why the main reasons, as I mentioned in the first section, he's like, the good of this plantation, for the glory of God, for the good of this country, honor the country, for my own salvations. Those are his reasons for marrying Pocahontas, not because he likes her or loves her or just has manly affection towards a woman. Okay, he's doing it for godly reasons. And then he moves on to say, shall the base fears of displeasing the world overpower and withhold me from revealing unto man these spiritual works of the Lord, which in my meditations and prayers I have daily made known unto him? God forbid. So that section, he's basically saying, I've talked to God in my meditations and my prayers, and he wants me to do this. This is a godly work for me to do. And even though the world hates the fact that I'm going to be marrying an Indian, I'm going to do it because God wants me to do it, and it's for, you know, the good for the country, and you know, it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make, kind of impression. So based on that, what you're going to do is highlight at least one thing, but there are several things you can highlight. What in there did he say tells you that he thinks? Because so if you're thinking, okay, and I'm going to help you with this one. Obviously, he thinks lesser of Native Americans, especially Pocahontas, right? So he thinks that Indians are below Christians. He even talked at the very bottom that we're not going to read. He says, Christians are more pleasing to the eye, and marrying them is less fearful of offense. Like, it's not so bad to marry a Christian than it is to marry an Indian. Like, it's worse. So obviously, he thinks that Europeans are above your Indians, right? So what did he say that makes you think that, right? What did he say in there? That's what you're going to highlight. What did he say? And use the highlighters that are in there. And then there you go. Fingers are off there. Highlight what he said that makes you think that. Okay, juniors and seniors are going to hear this twice if you're watching this. Sophomores, I mentioned this in class, but the recording went weird. So after the recording of the second document that we went over, so we just talked about document B. You guys were finding, like, basically we figure that John Rolfe doesn't really think very highly of Indians. He talks down on them in this document. So what in there did he say that makes you think, yeah, he definitely doesn't think that they're even equal because he said this? That's what you're going to highlight. So the other one that we're going to read next is document F. So sophomores, this is for you mostly. Juniors, you guys will get this on Thursday, the 18th. So if you hear it twice, then, you know, great, you get to hear it twice. So this is Edward Randolph. He's talking about King Philip's War. So this is the war that we just watched in the video on After the Mayflower. So he's talking about, he's basically listing all the reports, what people say of that are causes of the war. So he's basically like, people told me this is the cause of the war. People told me this is the cause of the war. People told me this is cause of the war. Now we're not trying to figure out what really are the causes of the war. We're looking at what is he saying that shows us what he thinks of Native Americans. So that's what we're focusing on. It's not really the war, what happened there. So he says, various other reports and conjectures of the causes of the present Indian war. Sick means there's an error in the spelling, so war is spelled wrong. Some impute it to imprudent zeal in the magistrates of Boston to Christianize those heathen before they were civilized and enjoining them the strict observation of their laws. So basically he's like, the magistrates, the religious leaders, made a mistake by Christianizing them first before civilizing them. He's basically like, they should have civilized them first and then Christianized them. That's one thing that he's saying has been told is a cause of the war. Okay, so obviously he doesn't think that Indians are civilized. To the Europeans, they're like, you guys aren't civilized. That's why they use the word savage. That's the whole point of them using that word. Savage and heathen are terms that are used towards people who they deem as uncivilized. So they deem them as uncivilized, hence why they call them those words. So already we're getting a feel of his attitude towards them, right? The people on the other side, for lucre and gain, entice and provoke the Indians to the breach thereof, especially to drunkenness, to which those people are so generally addicted that they will strip themselves to their skin to have their fill of rum and brandy. So that section is basically saying people have said that the people are giving them tons of alcohol, trying to entice them, like, hey, you give me this, I'll give you some alcohol, to try to get them drunk, to try to get them so addicted to alcohol that they'll do whatever it takes and even do crazy things just to get their alcohol. If you've ever heard of the stereotype of natives and alcohol, well, guess where it starts? Right here. Some believe there have been vagrant and Jesuitical priests who have made it their business for some years past to go from sachem to sachem to exasperate the Indians against the English and to bring them into a confederacy. They were promised supplies from France and other parts to extirpate the English nation out of the continent of America. So this one is basically saying, well, this is another possible cause of the war, that there's these priests who come in and say, hey, Indians, we'll give you supplies and we'll give you, goods and guns if you help fight against the English to get them out of the area, kick them out of England or America. And so that's a possible cause of the war. So it's kind of like they're kind of getting revenge here and being influenced by priests from other countries, especially France, which I don't really think that's really true because France really didn't have too much of a presence in those areas, but this is what they said. But the government of the Massachusetts has contributed much to their misfortunes, for they first taught the Indians the use of arms and admitted them to be present at all their musters and trainings, and showed them how to handle, mend, and fix their muskets, and have been furnished with all sorts of arms by permission of the government. So in this cause, he's basically saying the government of Massachusetts, they're at fault for this war because they're the ones who gave Indians muskets and guns. They're the ones who told them how to fix it and keep them clean and train them on how to use it. So it's your own fault for this war because you're the ones who gave them this stuff. It's basically, I picture this as them saying, like, as if you give a child something that's not good for a child, and like, well, you shouldn't have given that to the child. Now it's your own fault. So that's the kind of attitude that they have towards that. So now go ahead and make sure in Cami or on your paper, for those who have the paper version, highlight from document F what he says that tells you what his attitude is towards Indians. What does he think of Indians? Does he think good or bad? Well, if it's good, why? Highlight what he said that makes you think that. If it's bad, why? Highlight what he said that makes you think that. So that's where we got, as far as we got for the sophomores. Juniors will get that, and so you'll hear that again from the Zoom class tomorrow. So that's it for today. Make sure to turn in everything by next week, or else I can't accept it after that. See you guys. Parent teacher conferences today.